Hi, in this video, I'm going to go over passage 4 from Prep Test 83 from the reading comprehension section. Okay, the novelist and social theorist Charlotte Perkins Gilman, whose writings were widely read and discussed in the early 20th century, played an important role in the debate about the theories of Charles Darwin and their application to society. All right, let's see what role that might be. Darwin's theory of evolution did not directly apply to social ideology. Okay. But various intellectuals translated his ideas of natural selection into social language and argued about their interpretation. Some of these social Darwinist theories held that the nature of human social interactions is strictly determined by the process of biological evolution, and that it is futile to try to meddle with the competitive struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest. So some held all this. Another more active group of social Darwinists held that although changes in human societies, like those that occur in biological species, do constitute a sort of evolution, this evolution at the level of a human society need not be competitive, but can emerge through collective action within society. Okay, so the first group, we have competitive struggle, survival of the fittest, whereas the second group said need not be competitive. Which one is Gilman a part of? Gilman identified herself with this latter ideological camp. So the latter ideological camp would be the ones that are non-competitive, the collective action group. So there we go. All right. The central thesis of this group of social Darwinists was that although people, like all life, are the products of natural evolutionary forces, the principles of change that determine the development of organisms have brought humans to the point where it is possible for us to contribute consciously to the evolutionary process. All right. So it's not so much that natural selection is just acting on us and it's futile or useless to try to meddle, but we actually can contribute to redesign and mold our societies in appropriate ways. This, for Gilman, was not simply a descriptive observation about humanity. So it wasn't merely about what is the case, but was also a source of ethical responsibility. So it was about what should be the case, right? So it gives us insight into what we should do, how things ought to be, how we ought to behave. She argued that since a prime source of social evolution is human work, whether in crafts, trades, arts, or sciences, one of the primary ethical responsibilities of a person is to identify and engage in work that is societally relevant and that makes the best use of that person's talents. Okay, so here's where we really get Gilman's contribution and her ideas. Gilman was not merely engaged in an intellectual debate. Motivated by her ethical vision and convinced of the plasticity or moldableness of human nature, Gilman vehemently sought to break the molds in which people, especially women, had been thrust. Seems like she's coming from a feminist perspective here. In both her fiction, so she also wrote fiction, and her social theory, she urges women to further social evolution by collectively working toward a reorganization of society. A central goal of the reorganization she envisioned would be the abandonment of gender-specific work roles and hierarchical relationships. Gilman believed that at one time such arrangements had been necessary for evolution because what she felt were male traits of assertiveness, combat, and display were essential for the development of a complex society. Future progress, she believed, now required the restoration of a balance that would include what she saw as female qualities of cooperation and nurturance. So she didn't didn't think that there were no differences between masculinity and femininity. Like she saw that there being male traits and being female qualities, female traits. And she thought that at one time it was necessary to have gender specific work roles. And that I think even here that hierarchical relationships that are gender specific, she thought that at some point historically they were necessary, or in our evolution they were necessary for the development of society. But that now we needed to have more equal contributions, I guess, is sort of what she's saying here, which is interesting. Yeah, I wonder what she thought about how those traits, how women's contributions, maybe not as being at the top of the hierarchy, were still essential for developing complex society. Or I'm not super familiar with her work, so I can't go into that, but that's not the point. Okay, so I didn't highlight a whole lot, but pretty much the last two paragraphs are all just about Gilman's perspective. And then the first paragraph just like introduces her perspective as part of one group. And there are two groups, and one of them is more activist, another more activist group. I think I may have said more active group, but it is, more activist group, which would make sense, right? Because the first group, one of the things that they believe is that it's futile to try to meddle with this competitive struggle, so they wouldn't be likely to become activists, right? It's a more passive ideology. Okay, so what's the main point of the passage? Gilman's activist social theory, okay, that's accurately describing social theory, which called for the abolition of gender-specific work roles. That was something that she advocated. Contributed the central doctrine to one type of social Darwinism that distinguished it from the other more competitive-minded social Darwinist camp. I'm not sure if that's the case, that she contributed the central doctrine. It just says like important role in the debate. So that maybe a little bit too strong language there. Although Gilman aligned herself with the activist group of social Darwinists, yes, she rejected some of its doctrines. I don't actually see anything about her rejecting that. Also, I really do think that part about her contributing the central doctrine, because so the central thesis is here, but it never says anything about Gilman actually being the one to contribute that to the group. Okay, I'm gonna eliminate B. Unlike most social Darwinists of her time, can't say that. Gilman's version of social Darwinism held that people can and should contribute actively to the social evolution of humanity, yes, and in her writing she advised women to do so through efforts to eliminate traditional gender roles. Yes, that seems accurate. Gilman, whose important contributions to debate over the application of Darwinism to social ideology were widely recognized in the early 20th century, should also be recognized for her writings on women's social issues. I don't think this is like a situation where the author is really saying that we should be recognizing her for this extra thing, as if she's gone unrecognized for it. I prefer D. 22. The passage most strongly suggests that which one of the following statements is true? A, Gilman's social theory was unlike other applications of evolutionary theory to the social realm because it was not closely aligned with any major political movements of her time. I would eliminate that one. One of Gilman's innovations was the introduction of social discourse into the debate about the theories of Charles Darwin, which prior to her work at folks, no, I don't think that her role was really as like an innovator or as like spearheading the kind of discourse about the social applications of Darwinism. Gilman worked in direct collaboration with other social activists toward the implementation of a set of social reforms that were based on her evolutionary doctrines. Direct collaboration? Unsure, actually. So it could have been more indirect. She wrote, she was a novelist and a social theorist. Okay, so it does say up here that she was a novelist. So the fiction thing's mentioned twice. Yeah, I don't know. Direct collaboration, it never mentions by name any of the other social activists and doesn't say that specifically. Yeah, it was through writing. So I would keep moving. D, Charles Darwin's writings on the evolution of biological species influenced Gilman's work only indirectly through the writings of other social Darwinists. That I can't really say either. Pardon me. Yeah, did not directly apply, but various intellectuals translated his ideas. Let's see. Other evolutionary theorists contemporary with or prior to Gilman shared her view about whether or not. Yeah, so certainly she identified with a particular ideological camp. She wasn't just out here with her own completely unique view. So it does seem that other people actually did share her view. So I would go with E. Okay. 23. Which one of the following sequences most accurately expresses the organization of the passage? The author identifies a particular individual as a proponent of one of two versions of a theory, and then describes how that individual drew practical implications from the theory and relates some of those implications. Yeah, A looks pretty good. I would keep it for now. The author describes the relationship of a particular individual to an intellectual community, characterizes in general terms a theory held by that individual, contrasts that theory with another related theory, and then rejects one of those two. No, so this is where it goes off the path. So where it deviates from the passage. The author proposes an interpretation of a particular individual's writings. I don't think that's really how the author begins. The author describes some reasoning used by a group of theorists, evaluates that reasoning, attributes similar reasoning. No, it doesn't have like the two different camps, which I like in A. The author presents some historical facts about the development of a scientific theory, explains the role played by a particular individual in the formulation of that theory. No. And then critics, no, doesn't talk about the critics. So A. Next one. The passage indicates that Gilman believed that which one of the following can be a significant factor in the evolution of society? Skilled occupations. So she does talk about, she argued that the prime source is human work. So we've got crafts, trades, arts, sciences, right? And people need to identify and engage in work that's societally relevant and makes the best use of that person's talents. So skilled occupations. The passage gives evidence that Gilman valued which one of the following as an instrument of social progress in her time? Industrialization, unsure, fiction writing. I mean, she was a novelist, and does it talk about? Yeah, in her fiction. Okay, international travel. Don't see any evidence of that. Religious training. Don't see evidence of that. And combative personality traits. Not in her time, right? So we have assertiveness, combat, display. Those, maybe you could look at those as personality traits, but she believed that in her time, they needed more cooperation and nurturance. So I think I would go with B, fiction writing. Yeah, I would just choose that because it's mentioned as something that she was doing. And she was using it as an instrument of social progress. So there's some evidence there, and because it does say in her time, so that would be okay. The passage can most accurately be described as which one of the following? A defense of the principles of social theory that were promulgated by a particular group of writers and advocates. No, I don't see it as a defense. A description of the role played by a particular writer. I like that. In an intellectual controversy over the consequences of a scientific theory. Yes, so there is a controversy, right? There are two different groups of social Darwinists. And the consequences of a scientific theory, yeah, the social consequences of the biological theory. So I like B. C, an explication of the theoretical points of disagreement. This doesn't mention a particular individual, right? So it just talks about disagreement between the two theories. And they don't have identical goals. A defense of one interpretation of a particular writer's views. Again, I don't see it as a defense, more of a description. And I don't see there being like a strong rejection of the other views. The author doesn't really seem to take a stance on which of the groups of social Darwinists were correct. Just like continues to talk about what Gilman argued, what she proposed, what she was doing, and what she believed, rather than then like kind of espousing those views as their own. E, an introduction to a general type of scientific theory, clarified by details. No, I don't really see that. Introduction to a general type of scientific theory, clarified by a detailed presentation of one writer's version of that theory. So B is better. Is there anything about E that is like clearly incorrect? I don't like this general type of scientific theory. And then also one writer's version of that theory. There are two main versions, and then the writer is like part of one of those. So here, when it talks about like the role played by the writer Gilman, right, in this controversy, that makes more sense to me. And it's the consequences of scientific theory rather than just like introducing us to the theory. It doesn't even really introduce us to the theory of evolution. Yeah, it doesn't like define it or anything like that. So yeah. Which one of the following is implied by Gilman's views as described in the passage? A, some social conditions on which social evolution depends at certain times in human history are detrimental to further social evolution at other times in history. I think so, because that's implied by her views, right? So she believed that the arrangements that we should get rid of now, right? Like she thinks we should abandon gender-specific work roles, or at the time that she was writing, she was saying that they should be abandoned. But she believed that those arrangements were necessary at one point. So I think A is is very well supported. B, the types of changes that constitute genuine social evolution can no longer be brought about except through coordinated efforts. She doesn't. No, I don't think so. Coordinated efforts. I mean, she definitely thinks that cooperation and collective action is important, but I don't think she believed that we wouldn't be able to have social evolution without that, but just that it's like possible to do that, right? It doesn't need to be competitive. It can emerge through collective action. It's possible for us to contribute consciously. So yeah, we'll eliminate that. Gender-based hierarchical relationships, which predated and led to the development of gender-specific work roles, will probably be especially difficult to eradicate. There's no implication about the difficulty. While social Darwinist theories are essentially descriptive and thus do not have ethical implications, they can be useful rhetorically. No, so she actually believed that the theory did have ethical implications, or a version of the theory of social Darwinism that would have ethical implications. E, continuation of the process of social evolution will lead inevitably to the inclusion of more cooperation and nurturance. Inevitably, I'm not sure that that's the case. I think she was really trying to argue a particular type of social evolution, right? And speak about the ways that people should engage in the process and try to influence the process. So I don't think that she would have thought that it was just inevitable, and otherwise she would have probably been a bit more passive. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this passage. Please let me know if you have any follow-up questions.